We got the last shot, and then people closed in on us, and it was a very weird experience. We were hugging and saying goodbye, and there were tears and stuff.
Alan Alda is not just Hawkeye Pierce. He embodies a different kind of Hollywood, one where kindness, intellect, and integrity can coexist with fame. A multi-talented artist, a sharp-witted writer, a devoted husband, and a tireless voice for humanity for over 60 years. But behind the spotlight, he was once at the center of backstage tensions, criticized by co-stars for hogging the screen, keeping the death of Henry Blake's character a secret, and silently watching close friends pass away, both on screen and in real life. What makes Alan Alda both deeply beloved and a figure of controversy? And when the stage lights finally dim, what truly remains? This video will reveal the full story, from unpublished memoirs to the behind-the-scenes truth of the shocking decision that led McLean Stevenson to leave his role at the height of success. This is a journey you won't want to miss. Alan Alda, born Alfonso Joseph d'Abruzzo, was born on January 28, 1936, in Manhattan, New York. From the very beginning, his life was a turbulent journey. His father, Robert Alda, a stage actor and singer of Italian-American descent, had a birth name just as long: Alfonso Giuseppe Giovanni Roberto d'Abruzzo. His mother, Joan Brown, was of Irish heritage, once a beauty pageant winner who later became a homemaker. But behind that glamorous exterior, the family was riddled with instability. Alan grew up on the road, touring across America to follow his father's performances, from grand theaters to smoky lounges. As a child, he appeared with his father in comedy acts on stage. But the stage lights couldn't mask the darkness behind the scenes. His mother suffered from schizophrenia, often experiencing violent delusions. Alan once recalled that when he was 6, his mother tried to stab his father with a knife right in front of him. Worse still, on another occasion, she believed her husband was trying to steal her son, so she kidnapped Alan herself and went on the run for days, hiding from both family and police. In a family like that, improvisation wasn't a performance skill. It was a survival instinct. Alan had to learn to anticipate his mother's behavior, read the adults' expressions, and stay calm to protect himself. From an early age, he understood that to survive, he had to know how to tell a story in a way that made people listen. At age 7, Alan contracted polio. To treat him, his parents followed the method of Sister Elizabeth Kenny, which involved applying hot woolen wraps and continuously stretching the muscles. It was a process that was both physically painful and emotionally isolating. After the treatment, he entered a strict rehabilitation routine, swimming 7 hours a day, pushing himself to regain normal movement. Those long months of immobility, followed by relentless swimming, forged a will of steel, one that would later become the inner strength defining his performances. He attended Archbishop Stepanak High School in White Plains, then majored in English at Fordham University in the Bronx, where he worked as a student broadcaster for FM station WFUV. In his junior year, he studied abroad in Paris, performed in plays in Rome, and even appeared on television with his father in Amsterdam. His talent didn't come from elite drama schools. It came from real life, where he had to act simply to survive a harrowing childhood. In 1956, he graduated and joined the U.S. Army Reserve through the ROTC program. He served 6 months at Fort Benning, Georgia. Although there were false claims that he saw combat in Korea, in truth, he was stationed in New York and once joked that his main duty was overseeing a mess tent. Still, that brief military experience would later serve as vivid material for his portrayal of Army Dr. Hawkeye Pierce in MASH. From a paralyzed child, raised by a mentally ill mother and an addicted father, Alan Alda not only survived, he stepped into the light and became a voice of humanity for an entire generation. If you ever thought wounds were what drag us down, this story will show you. It's through the cracks that the light gets in. A childhood full of pain didn't stop Alan Alda from stepping onto the stage. On the contrary, it became the foundation for a unique acting style, truthful, composed, and never exaggerated. After leaving the military, Alan Alda returned to the theater, where he felt most himself. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, he appeared in numerous off-Broadway plays and took on small television roles, patiently accumulating experience in silence. There was no glamour, no scandals, but those who worked with him remembered him as meticulous, thoughtful, and exceptionally intelligent. One of his first major television milestones was the political satire program That Was the Week That Was, TW3. It was a topical sketch comedy show, a forerunner to Saturday Night Live, and Alda contributed not only as an actor but also as a sharp-witted comedy writer. It was here that he first showcased his ability to blend humor with social commentary, a formula that would later define his entire career. While TW3 didn't catapult him to stardom, it served as fertile ground for refining his artistic identity. Intelligent, humane, but never compromising. The real breakthrough came in 1966, when he landed the lead role in the Broadway musical The Apple Tree, a show made up of 3 stories, 3 characters, and 3 distinct emotional tones. Alan had to transform into Adam from the Garden of Eden, a romantic medieval knight, and a modern-day lovelorn man, all in a single evening, each role requiring complete shifts in physicality, voice, and singing ability. What's remarkable is that he had no formal musical training. Everything came from hard work, instinct, and emotional intuition. He once shared that it was his mentally ill mother, unintentionally, who taught him the ability to improvise to survive from a young age. Now he was using that very instinct in the service of art. His performance in The Apple Tree earned him a Tony Award nomination and, more importantly, caught the attention of Hollywood. A fascinating behind-the-scenes detail. During the run of The Apple Tree, he often rewrote his own dialogue, not to stand out, but to make the characters sound more like real people. Instead of objecting, director Mike Nichols agreed. Alan knows what's real and what's just theater. That moment marked the birth of a signature style, acting as a mirror to the human soul in the most honest way possible. And from that stage, Alan Alda was no longer seen as a forgettable face on TV, but as a thinking artist, one who constantly reinvented himself to serve a singular purpose: storytelling with truth. Alan Alda's life-changing journey began with a modest novel published in 1968, MASH, a novel about 3 Army doctors, written by Army surgeon H. Richard Hornberger and author W.C. Hines. It was a dark, bitterly humorous tale drawn from real-life experiences in a field hospital during the Korean War. In 1970, director Robert Altman adapted it into a feature film, and by 1972, CBS decided to turn it into a TV series. The medical unit was renamed the 4077th, and with that, a whole new era of television began. Alan Alda was hastily invited to audition for the role of Hawkeye Pierce. He had only a few hours to read the script in New York before flying out. No time to prepare, no glamour surrounding it. But after just a few pages, he knew. This wasn't a typical sitcom. MASH had depth. It had tears behind the laughter. And most importantly, it held the power to speak truths that post-war audiences were desperately yearning to hear. At a time when America was grappling with the aftermath of the Vietnam War, MASH aired like a mournful ballad, satirical yet compassionate. It didn't shy away from the cost of war, exposing the pain, absurdity, and humanity amid the chaos. Alda, who had served in the Army and cared for wounded soldiers, felt Hawkeye was an emotional mirror of himself. He wasn't cast for his fame, but for his ability to channel the soul of the character. Originally, Hawkeye wasn't the centerpiece of the show, but on screen, Alda's blend of irreverent humor and emotional depth transformed the landscape. He didn't just act, he rewrote dialogue to preserve authenticity directed episodes, and gradually became the show's creative backbone. Over 11 seasons, he directed 31 episodes and wrote 13, turning a sitcom into one of the most profound anti-war and humanistic series in American TV history. But success never came easy. Alda insisted on taking a few days off each month to fly back to New Jersey and visit his wife and daughters, paying for the flights himself, not wanting to abandon his family. Because of this deep personal commitment, he gained significant creative input, sometimes scrapping entire episodes that clashed with the show's anti-war message, even redirecting the series after its first season. That creative authority, however, led to conflicts with co-stars. Wayne Rogers, Trapper John, and McLean Stevenson, Henry Blake, left the show feeling their roles had been sidelined. Gary Berghoff, Radar, departed after backstage tensions and personal struggles. Director Jackie Cooper clashed fiercely with Alda over creative control. But above it all, MASH rose to become a landmark, not just for its cast, but because of the moral core and unshakable integrity Alda brought to the show. The final episode, Goodbye, Farewell, and Amen, 1983, drew over 106 million viewers, becoming the most watched television moment in American history. Alda both wrote and directed the finale, and asked the crew to keep the script secret to capture raw reactions. When filming ended, many cried. Alda himself sat alone in the editing room and couldn't stop weeping. After MASH, Alan Alda was no longer just a stage actor. He became a national figure, the man millions of American families trusted every Monday night. For his role as Hawkeye, he won 5 Emmys and 6 Golden Globes, becoming the first person in history to win Emmys for acting, writing, and directing, all for a single series. What made MASH timeless was that Hawkeye wasn't just a character. He was Alan Alda, a man who had once seen his delusional mother attack his father with a knife, who lay paralyzed as a child, who served in the army and lived by emotional intelligence. Every line, every look in the show came from real memory. No other series had ever done that. Alda wasn't just a faithful storyteller, he knew how to turn pain into art. One of the most powerful episodes was Dear Sigmund in Season 5, which he wrote and directed. In it, psychiatrist Sidney Friedman writes a letter to Sigmund Freud reflecting on the mental unraveling of American soldiers in war. Laced between laughter were exhaustion, depression, and shattered spirits, conveyed not through philosophy, but through raw emotion. The episode stood as proof. To Alda, MASH wasn't just television. It was a form of healing for himself and for the audience. But defending those creative choices meant facing intense clashes. Director Jackie Cooper, a veteran in the industry, left the show after heated disagreements with Alda. While Cooper demanded precise line readings, Alda believed in improvisation and authentic actor reactions, what he saw as essential to an emotionally driven series like MASH Star. And he was right. After Cooper exited, Alda's essence became even more pronounced. Truthful, warm, profoundly human. Alda wasn't the only one shaping that spirit. Loretta Swit, who played Major Houlihan, fought hard for her character to be more than a one-dimensional sex symbol. Through relentless effort, she transformed Hot Lips into an intelligent, strong, psychologically complex woman, a groundbreaking role on television at the time. That's what allowed MASH to transcend the boundaries of entertainment, to become a work that spoke deeply about gender, war, and human dignity. After MASH ended, Alan Alda didn't choose to rest on the glow of past glory. He continued challenging himself in both film and television, taking on roles that were introspective, humorous, yet deeply resonant. The film The 4 Seasons, 1981, which he wrote, directed, and starred in, was a major commercial success, proving that he could shine without scrubs or a military tent. The film carried a distinctly humanistic tone, exploring midlife crises through a comedic lens. the kind of comedy only Alda could make the audience laugh at while also making them sigh. He went on to collaborate with Woody Allen in two notable films, Crimes and Misdemeanors, 1989, and Manhattan Murder Mystery, 1993. With his intelligent, sharp acting style, Alda was hailed as one of the rare men who can make audiences burst out laughing and fall silent in reflection at the same time. His film career wasn't flashy, but steadily reinforcing the idea that he was far more than just a TV actor. Then, in 2004, he surprised critics with his performance in The Aviator, Martin Scorsese's biographical epic about Howard Hughes. As Senator Ralph Owen Brewster, Alda portrayed a calculating, icy politician with ruthless ambition. The role earned him his first and only Oscar nomination. Gone was the cheerful doctor, the healing humor of wartime. Alda proved he could step into the shadows and act with silence. He didn't stop at film. He returned to television with a string of memorable performances. In The West Wing, he played Senator Arnold Vinnick, a Republican politician with a progressive mind steeped in conflict and thoughtful dialogue. The role earned him another Emmy, 2006, and brought him into the hearts of a new generation of viewers, those who had never seen MASH. He continued to appear in 30 Rock, ER, Ray Donovan, and even the heist comedy Tower Heist, 2011, proving he had never lost his instinct for transformation. To this day, Alan Alda remains the first and only person to win Emmys in all three categories: acting, writing, and directing. He holds 6 Emmys, 6 Golden Globes, 1 Oscar nomination, and widespread critical acclaim. But more importantly, he accomplished something few dare to try: stepping out from the shadow of a television legend without ever losing himself. After conquering television, film, and theater, Alan Alda ventured into a field that seemed distant, but was in fact deeply aligned with his soul: writing books. And once again, he surprised the public, not with sensational novels or self-glorifying memoirs, but with pages that were honest, warm, and full of reflection, just like the way he lived. I wanted to be a writer when I was 8 years old, and it wasn't until I was 9 that I wanted to be an actor. What sounds like a humorous remark is actually the key to understanding a lesser-known side of Alan Alda. Long before the spotlight, he had been captivated by the power of words. And in his 70s, he returned to that childhood dream by fulfilling it completely. His first book, Never Have Your Dog Stuffed, and Other Things I've Learned, 2005, was a memoir as sincere as it was painful. In it, he wrote about his turbulent childhood, his relationship with his mentally ill mother, the loneliness of his youth, and his journey toward discovering his artistic identity. Upon release, the book became a New York Times bestseller, staying in the top 10 for weeks and being translated into over 10 languages worldwide. 2 years later, he published Things I Overheard While Talking to Myself, 2007, a unique collection of speeches, life lessons, and introspective musings. Though the subject matter wasn't sensational, the book resonated with millions thanks to its plain-spoken voice and deep message. It once again landed on the New York Times bestseller list, proving that audiences didn't just love his performances, they longed to hear the real voice of his heart. By 2017, at age 81, he released his third book, If I Understood You, Would I Have This Look on My Face? A book unlike any other. It wasn't a memoir or a collection of essays, but a work that blended science, art, and communication skills. Alda shared what he had learned from acting, from working with scientists, and from his own life about how to listen better, empathize more, and communicate effectively. The book sold over 300,000 copies in its first 6 months and was adopted by universities, tech companies, and science organizations as a professional communication resource. 3 books, 3 stages of life. From a shy boy in a showbiz family to an anti-war artist on television, and finally a humanist thinker bridging science and humanity. All written not with grandeur, but with sharp emotional intelligence, the soft power that made Alan Alda one of the most beloved storytellers in America. At an age when most people choose to retire, Alan Alda began an entirely new journey, a mission to bring science closer to the hearts of the public, not through dry formulas, but through what he did best, forging human-to-human connections. In 2009, after years of collaborating with the scientific community, he officially founded the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University in New York. The center was born with a simple but bold goal: to teach scientists how to talk to the public, not through jargon, but through empathy. Alda believed that if a researcher couldn't explain their work to their 11-year-old grandchild, they didn't truly understand it themselves. That philosophy became the foundation of a unique teaching method combining acting, role play, empathy training, and nonverbal communication. Within just a few years, the center had trained over 15,000 scientists worldwide, from infectious disease experts and astrophysicists to artificial intelligence engineers, transforming them into storytellers who could inspire. It didn't just change how science was understood, it changed how science was felt. But Alda didn't stop at the classroom. In 2018, he launched the podcast Clear Plus Vivid, where he interviewed leading figures across disciplines, from neuroscientists and NASA astronauts to artists like Tom Hanks, Tina Fey, Jane Goodall, and Yo-Yo Ma. The recurring theme: the art of human connection. There were no scripts, no gimmicks, just sincere, warm conversations where Alda used his curiosity and compassion to open the door to others' inner worlds. The podcast quickly became a phenomenon, attracting millions of listens each year and ranking among the top educational podcasts in the U.S. Young listeners wrote to Alda, sharing how they now understood their parents better, worked more effectively, and listened more deeply, all from a single 30-minute conversation. Through the Communication Center and Clear Plus Vivid, Alan Alda was no longer just an actor, no longer just a writer. He became a connector. He didn't teach people how to sound smart. He taught them how to be understood, how to be approachable, and in doing so, helped reshape how society listens to one another. Though he emerged from a classic sitcom, Alan Alda was never the kind of artist who stayed silent behind the scenes. Even while MASH was still airing, he used his fame to push for broader change, not on screen, but in the real world. Alda was one of the first male figures in Hollywood to openly support feminism, not just in words, but through concrete actions. During his time on MASH, he consistently advocated for female characters to break out of stereotypes, urging writers to explore women's emotional depth and intellect, most notably with the character of Major Houlihan, who evolved from a military Barbie into a symbol of strength and independence. Starting in the 1980s, he made regular appearances on talk shows, conferences, and public education campaigns to speak out against gender bias in science and the arts. Never one to shout in anger, Alda approached the subject with humor and calmness, making his arguments more persuasive than any slogan chanted in the streets. He once stated plainly, "No one should have to shout to be heard, especially women. The issue isn't that they're too small, it's that we haven't stayed quiet long enough to really hear them." Through his Clear Plus Vivid podcast and the Science Communication Center he founded, Alda turned those words into a foundation for action. He invited many female scientists, artists, and leaders to discuss the invisible barriers they face, from academic prejudice to underrepresentation in public policy. Beyond gender equality, he also became a familiar face in civic communication campaigns, raising awareness about climate change, promoting STEM education for girls, and speaking out against school violence. To Alda, art only holds value if it's tied to social responsibility. At age 80, he no longer needed to maintain any kind of image, but he chose to maintain one thing: being a kind, rational, and fearless voice. In a world increasingly divided, Alan Alda has never been loud, but he has always been heard. In a world where Hollywood marriages often last shorter than a TV season, Alan Alda quietly proved the opposite. He married Arlene Weiss in 1957, and from that day on, never left her side. They met in the most unlikely way, at a party when both of them bent down to pick up a fallen brownie, covered in shattered glass. "We both ate it, glass and all, and I knew I was going to marry her," Alda later recalled with his trademark humor, concealing an unwavering sense of certainty. No drama, no grand gestures. Their love began with a strange, simple harmony. Arlene Weiss isn't a movie star, but she is a quiet intellect. A classical pianist who once performed with the Bronx Symphony Orchestra, she's also a feminist scholar, writer, and sharp cultural commentator. Her independence, depth, and emotional insight, Alda once said, captivated me forever. More than 65 years later, they are still side by side through night shoots, major awards, and the inevitable challenges of aging. Arlene isn't just his life partner, she's his silent, creative collaborator, the one who reads his drafts, offers tough critiques, and keeps him grounded. Throughout his career, Alda has emphasized he couldn't have done what he did without her quiet presence and brilliant mind by his side. They have 3 daughters, Eve, Elizabeth, and Beatrice, all of whom pursued careers in the arts, psychology, or education. Alda has said he didn't raise his children with lectures, but by listening, a principle he learned from his own marriage. When asked whether there's a secret to a long, happy marriage, he replied, "No. I don't think you can wrap that up into a tidy story. It's about knowing how much you love the other person, not just in tender moments, but when you're yelling in each other's faces." Arlene has a simpler explanation. And what is it? When people ask her the secret to a long marriage, she says it's a short memory. What's she like? A broad smile spreads across his face, and his eyes crinkle with joy. "She's amazing. I have to stop her from playing the piano just so we can talk. She practices at least 2 hours a day. She doesn't have the breath for the clarinet anymore, so she's returned to piano for the first time in decades." But even with a foundation as strong as his, Alan Alda's life couldn't escape one of aging's harshest challenges, when the body begins to falter. In 2018, during an interview on CBS This Morning, Alan Alda publicly revealed that he had been diagnosed with Parkinson's disease. In fact, he had received the diagnosis back in 2015 after noticing early signs during a televised interview. He saw his finger tremble slightly and immediately went for a checkup. An MRI confirmed the diagnosis. It wasn't a shock, it was a moment of choice. "I wasn't scared. I just thought I had to adapt," he said, with the same familiar smile still present, even in the face of an incurable illness. Alda didn't choose to hide his diagnosis to protect his reputation. On the contrary, he went public to break down stigma and spread the message that Parkinson's is not the end. He continued appearing on Ray Donovan, The Good Fight, and regularly hosting his podcast, Clear Plus Vivid. He shared that using his voice daily acted like therapy, keeping his brain engaged. And while many people his age rely on daily medical assistance, Alda still practices Thai boxing each morning, performs balance exercises, including standing on one leg while brushing his teeth, as a way to train his body and keep his mind sharp. A 2020 interview with The Guardian revealed an Alan Alda who understood his illness deeply, and perhaps understood better than anyone how to live fully despite it. He spent much of his time studying neuroscience, the mechanics of memory, emotion, and human connection. To him, emotional intelligence was something he could never give up, even as his body began to resist him. Through it all, the one person who never left his side was Arlene. From therapy sessions, stage appearances, to podcast recordings, she was always there, not as a caretaker, but as part of his spirit. Alda once said, "With her by my side, I don't feel a sense of loss. I just feel the need to keep going." Her quiet presence wasn't just a foundation, it was the force that gave him the courage to face illness with meaning and resolve. Alda's honesty and proactive stance generated a wave of empathy and admiration from the public. He didn't avoid the truth, didn't try to hide symptoms. Instead, he turned living with the disease into part of his life's message: resilient, positive, and endlessly creative. Parkinson's wasn't a period. It was a new path where he continued to tell stories, not through his eyes, but through an unshakable will. Just 24 hours after he disclosed his Parkinson's diagnosis on CBS, the keyword Alan Alda Parkinson was trending on Twitter in the US. Thousands thanked him for giving them the courage to face illness without shame. On Clear plus Vivid, many scientists and patients later shared, "Because of him, we began talking about our illness as something to be understood, not something to hide." Alan Alda didn't just leave a mark on screen. He left behind a legacy of humanity, education, and science. As one of the rare artists who succeeded in 4 arenas, acting, writing, directing, science communication, and social activism, he stands as a model of the intellectual, compassionate, and unpretentious artist. In 2009, he founded the Alan Alda Center for Communicating Science at Stony Brook University, which has since trained over 20,000 scientists and healthcare professionals across the US on how to communicate their research in a way that's clear, emotionally resonant, and relatable. Major universities like Harvard, Stanford, and MIT have adopted the center's methods. Alda also became a symbol of modern masculinity, defined not by power, dominance, or silence, but by empathy, listening, and kindness. Among fellow artists, he is revered not for boasting about roles, but for living by the principle. The person matters more than the part. In 2008, he was honored at the Kennedy Center Honors for his cultural contributions to America. And in 2019, he received the Screen Actors Guild Life Achievement Award, a thank you from an entire generation of actors, writers, scientists, and audiences. At the 2008 Kennedy Center ceremony, Alda didn't speak about his career. Instead, he offered a quiet message. "We often talk about pursuing passion, but what matters more is pursuing contribution." A brief remark, yet one that defines the life philosophy he leaves behind. Now, at 89, Alan Alda no longer appears on stage or headlines major television shows. But he has never stopped. In a modest home in New York, the man whose words once moved an entire nation continues to live quietly, but never silently. Every week, he records episodes of Clear plus Vivid, where he speaks with scientists, artists, and authors about what he calls the aesthetics of listening. He spends time gardening, reading, hosting workshops, and if there's a quiet moment in the day, he writes, "There are no more spotlights, but there is still light." Alda remains in touch with old MASH friends, especially Loretta Swit and Mike Farrell. In a moment of reflection about lost co-stars like McLean Stevenson and Harry Morgan, he fell silent, then wept. Not simply from sorrow, but from feeling lucky to have walked such a beautiful stretch of road with them. As Parkinson's becomes more visible, he fights to remain sharp as though each day is a new chapter to be completed. "I'm ready to die anytime, but before I die, I'll keep telling stories," he said. Not as a farewell, but as a declaration of life, calm, fierce, and kind to the very end. In 2025, Alan Alda mourned the loss of longtime co-star Loretta Swit, the woman who stood beside him through every MASH episode from day one. He wrote, "She wasn't just a talented actress. She worked to turn a stereotype into a real woman, with emotion, with depth, with dreams." For Alda, every farewell to a former comrade closes a chapter of memory. But still, he keeps telling stories, as promised. Alan Alda never lived like a star. He lived as a whole human being. 6 decades of storytelling across screen, stage, books, and even seminar rooms, and he never stopped. A Parkinson's diagnosis didn't silence him, and age never slowed him down. At 89, he still records his podcast, still shares profound conversations, still shines a small light on kindness in a world that often feels too loud. Over 20,000 scientists have been inspired by the communication methods he pioneered. Millions of viewers still remember every line spoken by Hawkeye Pierce. But for Alan Alda, the greatest measure may not lie in numbers. It may lie in the question he once asked himself, "If I understood you, would I look at you differently?" And you, after hearing this story, do you feel like you understand something new? If you enjoy meaningful stories about stars and the life lessons behind the fame, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. Many journeys are still ahead, stories that may make you laugh, cry, or see yourself in a whole new way.